Today, we're going to start the meeting with a conversation with Darshana Zaveri, Managing Partner at Catalyst Health Ventures. Darshana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ramana. Nice to be here and appreciate you doing this in the midst of, as you very rightly put it, this unprecedented situation. It's nice to be able to continue to do the things that we love to do.
Yeah. So Darshana, let's get you acquainted with our community here. Tell us a little bit about yourself as well as Catalyst.
Sure. So my name is Darshana Zaveri. I'm a managing partner at Catalyst Health Ventures. I have been at Catalyst since its inception in 2008. And we're two managing partners that manage the fund, which is Josh Phillips and myself. And we have been investing together since 2008 in this particular strategy that I'm about to describe. My own background is in science. I was a bench scientist for several years, doing pure pharma and drug discovery research before I went back to Harvard to get my MPA and then came to Catalyst. Our firm invests in healthcare, so we are a purely healthcare-focused venture capital firm based right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. We have about $150 million in assets under management across two funds. And we're now investing out of our new fund. And within the broad space of healthcare, we specifically focus on medical technologies. So we actually do not invest in biotech or pharma or pure drug discovery or anything that we consider sort of pure science risk. Instead, we focus on medical technologies, like medical devices, some diagnostics, and digital health.
Okay. And could you double-click down a little bit on some of the specifics of stage, for example? Let's start with stage. What stage do you like to invest in?
So we consider ourselves pretty early stage investors. We will do anything from Series A, even Series Seed at times, but certainly Series A and occasionally Series B. So we have some flexibility around that. Typically we like to be the first institutional investor in a company. So we bring the first institutional dollars into the company. Often with our money, the company formation occurs. So we're not afraid to go really early. But I would say typically we are Series A, where there is a product concept and some proof of concept that has been done in animals or some preclinical work. So pretty early.
So let me ask you a few slightly detailed questions, just because early is where we play. So early has lots of nuances in our world because we are deep into early, and early can be pre-product, early can be with a product concept and customer validation or channel validation, but not yet, especially medical devices. There are take some resources to get a product to market. So it's not so easy to, bootstrap your way to product and selling products and all that. Then digital health is a little bit different. So where, what do you want to see? Do you want to see a product ready? Do you want to see a product concept with some concept validation from the target customer base? What is the validation that you want to see to go into a deal?
Yeah, so great questions. And let me just step back to say, if you look across our portfolio, the majority of our deals are medical devices. So very, hardware-focused mechanical solutions for healthcare needs. We do some digital health, but it is very, very small part of our portfolio, maybe one deal out of the entire fund. So that's not the core of our expertise, and the core of our expertise is really medical devices and diagnostics. So as you correctly pointed out, in those kinds of companies, you cannot really bootstrap your way to the market. There's a lot of early development, product development, as well as clinical development and preclinical development that is required before you even get to market. And I have to say, when you kind of look at the types of companies that we are attracted to, most of our companies will actually never get to market as independent companies. So most of them will be bought out. These companies are addressing major unmet needs in healthcare that are long regulatory path to approval, and the majority of them will be acquired before they ever get to final regulatory approval and market. So where we like, what we like to see before we invest is a strong product concept. And sometimes that product concept is just something on paper. So I will give you an example. We invested in a company out of our last fund that was nothing but a drawing on paper. And there was not even a product to look at, and certainly no preclinical data. So we're not afraid to get into deals like that. However, what we will then do is make sure that we are appropriately capitalizing the companies and keeping them really lean until that critical clinical value has been demonstrated. In the case of the company that I just described, we did a total round of $250,000, and that $250K got us to a product concept that we could see, and also clinical demonstration of that product. And then we did a Series A and followed with a Series B. But we just want to make sure that if we get in that early, that we're not putting up too much money at risk at those early stages where there's a high risk of failure.
Excellent. So what about geography? You're based in the Boston area. Where do you like to invest?
So we're pretty broad across the U.S. I mean, we're a very small team ourselves. As I said, we're two managing partners and a few folks in the back office. So we tend to be New England focused just because of our location and where we tend to operate and where our connections are. But we do have portfolio companies across the U.S. We have one in Minneapolis, in Silicon Valley, in Utah. We're about to do a deal in Orange County. So, we are pretty broad within the U.S. We do not invest outside the U.S. That's not part of our mandate.
Great. Let's talk a bit about some of the companies you've invested in and, what they do. And when did they come to you? What did you see in those situations that caught your attention sufficiently to want to write a check?
Yeah. Okay. So, let me just start by saying, at a very high level, we are looking for technologies within healthcare that are addressing very large unmet needs. So, we're talking cardiology, oncology, women's health, big global issues that are unaddressed. And specifically those types of diseases that cannot be addressed with drugs or cannot effectively be addressed with drugs. And, the very, very simplistic example I like to give is if you have a hole in the heart, you have a hole in the heart, you got to fix it. It's a high value patient and a problem. And yet it's a mechanical problem, right? So it needs a mechanical solution. Can't fix it with a drug. So we're really looking for those types of technologies that will really change the therapeutic outcome for patients in a big way, in a major way. So that's the core of our thesis. Within that, we particularly like the cardiac space. and the structural heart space. We like the oncology space. Again, these are diseases with a great disease burden and burden on the healthcare system, and that are also strategically aligned with acquirers' interests. So those are the areas that we are specifically looking at, where we see a lot of unmet need. So some of the companies, I'll continue perhaps with the example that I started with. The company that we invested out of our last fund, the name of the company is Envision Medical, out of Silicon Valley. So this is a device to diagnose ovarian cancer early in women who are at high risk of acquiring the disease. So why do we like this? First off, ovarian cancer is a big unmet need. 80% of women with ovarian cancer are destined to die. And the problem really is in the early diagnosis. It's if you can diagnose the disease, you can treat it effectively. But the problem is you can't diagnose it. And if you think about why you can't diagnose it, it's a mechanical problem. The ovaries are in a part of the body that is hard to access. There are no diagnostic tests available. There's no blood tests available necessarily that are accurate. And so in order to address this mechanical problem of accessing the ovaries, this entrepreneur, very brilliant entrepreneur out of Silicon Valley, had the idea of creating a device. So almost like a pap smear-like device that goes deeper into the anatomy and collects cells from the fallopian tubes and the base of the ovaries. And once you get the cell sample, the actual test, the diagnostic test, is exactly like a pap smear. So you're not reinventing the wheel on the testing side. You're simply improving access to the organ. So how it aligned with our strategy is big unmet need, huge patient population, large number of women walking around with the risk of having the disease and no way of being screened or diagnosed early. An easy mechanical solution. I won't say easy, but a simple concept, which is mechanical in nature. There was no sort of... Go ahead.
I have a question on this one. Let's just kind of stay with this example for a moment. What is the go-to-market strategy for this company, and what is your fund strategy or investment thesis around go-to-market strategy? You mentioned something earlier on that these companies don't necessarily go to market on their own. You are looking for early exit. So could you please just reflect on that issue a bit? Yes.
Yeah, so this company, as it turns out, did exit. It was bought out in 2018 by Boston Scientific. So we actually followed the company, and we did the seed round. We led the Series A. We had a new investor come in and lead the Series B. And then eventually, in the fifth year, the company was acquired by Boston Scientific. It was a really nice deal and a very nice return for us. But of course, when we make the initial investment, we're not banking on that exit. We really do hope it's going to happen, but we're not banking on it. So we do have to think through the eventual commercialization strategy, if you will. And so in this case, what we liked about it is that there is a large number of women out there, about 600,000 in the U.S., who know that they have a high risk of developing ovarian cancer. The reason they know that is because they have some family member who had the disease, or they are positive for the BRCA gene. So, either they have a genetic mutation or a family related reason why they know they're at high risk. So these are women who want to be surveilled, and they are presenting themselves at the OBGYN's office. And so we do have sort of a clinical community that sees these patients and doesn't actually know what to do with them, right? What kind of testing can we do to give them some assurance? A lot of these women are young women who still want to have children and don't want to have their ovaries removed as a, risk-reducing kind of procedure. So they're coming to the office, they're presenting themselves. So you have the clinical community that wants a solution and you have a patient population that wants a solution. So we saw that there would be a pull from the market for this device. Of course, we would have to go through a fairly large clinical trial to, to be able to claim that this device can now diagnose ovarian cancer. I mean, that's a pretty large trial. And so, we had to kind of estimate what that would take, and if we had to take the company through that trial, how much money would be expected to spend on it. And then the final piece of this is reimbursement. How do you get paid for this device? And it turns out that there are, we did some analysis on this and actually hired reimbursement consultants and found that there is indeed a reimbursement code that can be applied to this particular procedure. So all of those elements put together gave us confidence that, if we had to take the company through commercialization, that we would actually be able to do it and would have a good chance.
And how far did the company get before it got acquired? Did it go through the clinical trials?
So typically, if you think about medical devices like this, there are typically multiple clinical trials. There's usually a very early kind of proof of concept trial just to show safety, that the device works. And then you have what I typically call a clinical proof of concept. So in this case, what we wanted to demonstrate is, take a certain number of women and, use the device, and who has cancer and who doesn't have cancer, or who has a high likelihood of having cancer. So the company had completed that small clinical proof of concept trial with 50 women that with exceptionally good results, and that would have informed the size and scope of that final pivotal trial that would get the company regulatory approval. Now that trial is not being done by this company anymore, but that's kind of the path to final approval and market launch.
Okay, very good. Interesting. So what do you see is going to happen given that you are, you're in a sector that is very relevant to what we're going through right now, and there is a furious effort to come up with all kinds of, testing devices, medical devices for testing the coronavirus and testing for antibodies of who has already got it and has become immunized, and testing for, have you already had it and have been asymptotic, and all kinds of things, asymptomatic. And all these are medical device problems, right? Then there is, of course, the vaccine side, drug side that is not relevant to your investment thesis, but there is a big medical device issue that is developing. How do you process what's happening?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we have certainly been thinking a lot internally about does this or does this not change the way we do things and the things that we focus on. So clearly we're not going to completely change our investment thesis because of this particular black swan event. So we won't suddenly start investing in vaccines or drugs or even drugs. However, there's a lot of elements to this pandemic that are relevant to us in any case, given our investment thesis. So as an example, we will certainly be paying a lot more attention to healthcare services, broadly, including telemedicine, which I think will become more and more rampant and more used as time goes by, right? Yeah. So I think we will certainly be paying more attention to that space and the digital health space in general. We've always been focused on diagnostic devices. And, we think in particular, and this pandemic has proven out that the American, healthcare system is not really set up for early detection and prevention. It is highly geared towards treatment. And, that is a structural problem that needs to be fixed. And we certainly hope that, as a result of this, this pandemic and the associated economic costs, that people will, all constituents of this system, including the regulatory agencies and the acquirers, will start paying more attention to diagnostic devices and prevention versus care, right? So that's always been part of our thesis, and it will continue to be part of our thesis going forward.
Well, and also to your point about go-to-market strategy, I don't know how this is all going to come together, but I expect that after we have dealt with this, as you called it, the Black Swan event, we are going to look at the federal governments and the state governments putting in a lot more infrastructure to deal with similar issues that can come up, and put a early diagnostic infrastructure in place that is, more home-based and not so much, overwhelming the healthcare system, the ICUs, and so forth. So early diagnostic, I think it needs to be part of the planning for epidemics going forward, pandemics and epidemics going forward. I imagine, I hope that the federal government and the state governments and the international bodies are going to put that infrastructure together. So that is going to create a lot of opportunities for people operating in that part of the ecosystem to have successful companies.
Absolutely. And, it's not just when you think about early detection and prevention, you're not just talking about the specific tests that are relevant to that particular virus or bacteria. It's also the instrumentation and the tools that go with it, right? It's both aspects of it. And it is
not just instrumentation and tools, it's instrumentation, tools, and the distribution infrastructure. You have to get these tools and systems in hands of the people in the last mile so that these things can happen far away from the hospital.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right, and we will certainly be keeping an eye out on, those types of technologies that facilitate that infrastructure. But the last thing I wanted to mention is, if you think about COVID and its impact on the population, we're still waiting for, all of the data on this to fall out eventually, but it's clear that, people with comorbidities are impacted much, much more than people who don't have comorbidities, right? So, people with underlying respiratory conditions or diabetes or cardiac issues or oncology. So ultimately, this is part of the overall health management of the population, right? So, and our focus on kind of the technologies that address those underlying conditions is kind of just as important as,
I think the regular management of all those diseases is going to remain investment opportunities. I think biotech is one of the most exciting fields. And so I think your core investment thesis remains. It's more like, there is something new that needs to be dealt with, that we're discovering we're woefully underprepared for. The systems don't exist, the tools don't exist, the tests don't exist, the instrumentation doesn't exist. It's really terrible.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And so a lot of investment needs to occur in the infrastructure space to kind of deal with this if and when. It's really not a question of if, it's a question of when it happens again.
And how, and absolutely. Wonderful conversation, Darshana. There is a company in our portfolio that comes to my mind right away that I will send you after we are done with this call, and we'll see if that's something interests you. And it's the pain
we would
medication.
love to look at it.
Yeah. Great. Very good.